Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers finished this past regular season in the NFL with a record of 9-7-1, and they were somehow, some way able to backdoor their way into the playoffs. It was really wild because going into week 18, they needed to not only beat the Baltimore Ravens, but they needed the Chargers and Raiders game not to end in a tie, and they needed the Jacksonville Jaguars to defeat the Indianapolis Colts. Now, it was pretty reasonable to see Pittsburgh beating the Ravens and for the Raiders-Chargers game not to end in a tie, but a lot of people, including myself, didn't really expect the Jaguars to defeat Indianapolis. That ended up happening, and the Pittsburgh Steelers ended up finessing their way into the playoffs. And even though they got destroyed by Kansas City in the Wildcard Round, I think it's fair to say that it was another successful season when you consider the preseason expectations that a lot of people have for the Steelers. Not too many people had the Steelers making it into the playoffs. And you look at the job that Mike Tomlin has done. Yes, the Steelers haven't had a lot of postseason success over the last couple of years. But if we're going based off performance from what Mike Tomlin has done over the last 3 seasons, I think that it's fair to say that Mike Tomlin has been coaching at a top 3 level, because you got to remember that not too many people even had the Steelers having a winning record going into the 2021 NFL season. Last year in 2020, the Steelers were once again not expected to make it to the playoffs. You know, Big Ben was regarded as being washed up. The Steelers ended up finding a way to not only make it to the playoffs, but win the division as well. And even the year before that, in 2019, when Ben Roethlisberger went down with that season-ending elbow injury, everybody was saying how the Steelers season was over, and Mike Tomlin was able to find a way to finish the year with an 8-8 record with Devlin Doug Hodges and Mason Rudolph as his 2 starting quarterbacks. So Mike Tomlin has done a very good job at getting the most out of this roster. Now, I think this upcoming offseason is going to be the most important offseason that Mike Tomlin has ever had during his career so far with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the reason being is because he's going to have the opportunity to handpick his future quarterback and the leader of this franchise for the next couple of years for the first time ever, because Ben Roethlisberger has been the stabilizing force at quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers for over the last couple of years and a decade. So now with him expected to retire, you got a big question mark about who's going to be the next guy to be Ben Roethlisberger's successor. Is it going to be Mason Rudolph? Is it going to be Dwayne Haskins, who Mike Tomlin likes a lot? Is it going to be a quarterback in the draft? Will Pittsburgh be able to land a guy like a Kenny Pickett or Desmond Ridder or Malik Willis? Or will they try to trade for a veteran during the offseason? Are they going to try to trade for Derek Carr or 49ers quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo? And it's really important that Mike Tomlin gets this quarterback situation right, because if he ends up getting it wrong, yeah, he's still good enough to get a team to the playoffs without great quarterback play, but there's going to be a new general manager in Pittsburgh. Keving Colbert is expected to step down after the draft. And after that, with a new general manager in, you look at Mike Tomlin, you know, a lot of people expect Super Bowls out of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they haven't been to one in some time. And you got to wonder how much pressure is on Mike Tomlin going into next season. Because, yeah, Mike Tomlin isn't one of those coaches that we expect to get fired simply because the expectations for him are so high. And normally, when you look at somebody like Mike Tomlin, I think that with somebody who's been with a franchise for so long and you bring in a new GM, it's always important that you make a good first impression, because that new general manager, like, he understands that Mike Tomlin is one of the most respected coaches in the NFL. He knows that Mike Tomlin is a future Hall of Famer, but at the same time, you still have to be able to win games, and you have to be able to win in the playoffs, and that's something that Mike Tomlin has not been able to do. So if the Steelers make it to the playoffs next year and they go one and done, I think that there is a possibility that Mike Tomlin and the Steelers organization could end up parting ways, and a lot of people aren't ready to talk about that, but the quarterback position is going to be really critical because the teams who advance the furthest in the playoffs are normally the teams who have good quarterback play, and even if they don't have elite quarterback play, they normally have a good quarterback that has at least a solid team around them. On top of that, you're going to have some questions about what are you going to do when it comes to the offensive line. Like, the offensive line isn't bad. Hopefully Pittsburgh retains Trey Turner. He had a pretty good year. You got Dan Moore there, young tackle. I think he has some potential there as well. Then you also have Kevin Dotson. So you have to improve guard. You have to improve the other offensive tackle spot. Now, many people are speculating that the Pittsburgh Steelers may end up signing or drafting another center and then moving Kendrick Green to his natural position of offensive guard, which is what he played when he was coming out of Illinois. He was ended up being a rookie center this year, and he kind of has some ups and downs, so one has to wonder about that. How are they going to address tackle? Because it's easy to say that all the Pittsburgh Steelers have to do is to sign one in free agency, which there are going to be some really high level offensive tackles available. However, the Steelers aren't really somebody who likes to splurge on one player in specifically. They're not an organization that's going to make somebody the highest paid player in the league based off free agency. The Steelers are a team that goes into free agency looking for bargains, so they don't really make any high profile free agency signings until when the free agency frenzy period has kind of passed, and there's a couple of key names still on the market, such as Melvin Ingram last offseason when they end up signing him. So for the Steelers, you go to the defense side of the football, you definitely have to be able to find a cornerback. I expect Pittsburgh to put a lot of money into the cornerback position because that's probably one of the youngest spots on the team. There was a lot of young players who got a lot of playing time this year for the Steelers at cornerback, and there wasn't really somebody who really stood out to me all that much. Joe Hayden was Joe Hayden, still had some good moments, but he also had some down moments as well, as age is now starting to catch up to him. James Pierre, which was somebody who many people had high hopes for because he was an undrafted rookie free agent coming out of FAU like a year ago. He had a really good training camp, and many people thought he would have a little bit of a bigger impact this year, and he did get some opportunities. He did get a good amount of playing time, and he wasn't bad, but he wasn't great. So the cornerback position has to get figured out. What are you going to do at linebacker? Joe Schobert was average. At times, he was above average. Then you have Devin Bush, who pretty much looked like a shell of himself coming back from that ACL injury. So maybe he'll bounce back next season. But mainly, improving the offensive line has to be the big focal point of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then finding who's going to be the successor to Ben Roethlisberger. Now, if you draft a quarterback, that's going to make things really interesting because the Steelers are an organization that can't really afford or doesn't really, like to wait a year or have a throwaway year, like a lot of people like to call it, for their young rookie quarterback to develop. So whoever you draft, they have to be able to start day one. So if you're going after a Kenny Pickett or Matt Corral, those are two guys who are going to be in the upcoming NFL draft who I feel are the most pro ready and the most ready to start week one in the NFL. Meanwhile, if you go over somebody like Malik Willis, okay, yes, he does have a lot of upside, but how long are you willing to wait if you are Mike Tomlin for Malik Willis to be ready to start? Because Mike Tomlin doesn't have a lot of time. I don't think he's going to have the luxury of being able to wait 3 or 4 years to get their young quarterback ready. If you're Mike Tomlin, you got to have somebody who can come in and contribute right away, because you don't really know how this organization with a new GM is going to view you if you're not able to have have success in the playoffs. So getting to the playoffs isn't really a big accomplishment for Pittsburgh now, because that's what the level of expectation is for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So making it to the playoffs isn't nothing to celebrate. If you're a Steelers fan, that's something that is expected out of this organization. What defines what Mike Tomlin's future is going to be in Pittsburgh for the foreseeable future is going to be just how successful Pittsburgh can be in the playoffs. So if you have a young quarterback, you don't really know how good he's going to be in the playoffs, because there are a lot of young quarterbacks who are really good during the regular season, but they end up, not showing up in the playoffs. You look at what has happened with Mac Jones with New England. Had a really good regular season, and then they got bounced out in the first round by the Buffalo Bills because Mac Jones, being a rookie quarterback, wasn't really, in a proper place to succeed in that wildcard round matchup against Buffalo, because without the run game, the New England Patriots offense was one-dimensional. They had to over-rely on Mac Jones, and they lost the game because of it. So rookie quarterbacks normally struggle in the postseason. So if you're Mike Tomlin, are you going to draft your quarterback and make him sit for a year and then bring in a veteran quarterback and then hope that you can still find a way to win in the playoffs? Or will you end up finding somebody via a trade like a Derek Carr or a Jimmy Garoppolo who you could trade for to be your successor? And then on top of that, you got to wonder how confident Mike Tomlin is in Mason Rudolph and Dwayne Haskins. We also cannot forget about Joshua Dobbs, even though I think Joshua Dobbs is only on the team just because, he's a good character to have in the locker room, because most of the times when you see Joshua Dobbs, he's either on the iPad or the clipboard going over plays with either Mason Rudolph or Ben Roethlisberger, or he's on the sideline with the earpiece in helping signal in the plays. So you don't really know if he's a legitimate option to view, but we definitely have to take him into account. Dwayne Haskins is really interesting because they signed him when he got released by Washington. There's a report coming out that he is going to have a legitimate opportunity to compete for the starting job. Mike Tomlin does like him a lot. They have the same agent, so makes a lot of sense. On top of that, Mason Rudolph has gotten a lot of playing time. He's been the backup behind Ben Roethlisberger. I don't really think that he's good, but I don't think that, he's really terrible, simply for the fact that the Steelers can win games with anybody. But a lot of Steeler fans, myself included, will hope that Mason Rudolph isn't the successor for Ben Roethlisberger. But this is a really important offseason for Mike Tomlin, because to be honest with you, we can say that Mike Tomlin has his job secured, but it's kind of difficult when you're coaching for a franchise like Pittsburgh, where the expectation is to win championships, which is something that the Steelers haven't come close to doing in pretty much a decade. So for Mike Tomlin, even if Pittsburgh does make it to the playoffs, what if they go one and done with a new general manager? Will he be willing to give Mike Tomlin more time to start producing in the postseason, or will he find another head coach that will? That's a big question, which is why I think that this is probably the most important offseason in Mike Tomlin's career, because you can probably make the argument and say that the Steelers are in a quarterback or bust situation, because if the Steelers can land the right quarterback, this team is a Super Bowl contender. Same thing with the Denver Broncos. Like, you look at the roster that the Steelers have, this is one of the best young rosters in the league. You got Pat Freiermuth, who was the second best rookie tight end this past season. You got Najee Harris, the best rookie running back this past year. You got Deontay Johnson, who had a breakout season. You have Chase Claypool, who had kind of a down year, but it should improve with a better quarterback, because you look at what Ben Roethlisberger was able to do this year. He wasn't bad, but you definitely can see that he wasn't the same quarterback that he was in his prime. He definitely has kind of fallen off a bit. Well, not even a bit, a lot. His regression is starting to take a noticeable toll on him. So with a younger quarterback with a better arm, Chase Claypool should have a big year in 2022. Then you look at the offensive line. The offensive line does have some solid pieces, and the defense still is really good when you have two of the best players at their position, and Cam Hayward and TJ Watt. And also, don't forget that Stephon Tuitt had 11.5 sacks previously didn't even play this year. Haven't seen him suit up at all in a Steelers jersey. So I'm excited to see what he does in 2022 coming back. Then you got Mika Fitzpatrick, one of the best at his position also. So if the Steelers can figure out the cornerback position, this defense is going to be really good. Then the quarterback position is going to be the main focal point for Mike Tomlin. How's he going to go about it? What's going to happen? It remains to be seen, but this is a really important offseason for Mike Tomlin because he has a big decision to make when it comes to finding Big Ben's successor at quarterback.